Your grown children almost certainly love you more than you think they do. And one quiet, well-meaning habit is hiding that love from both of you. I want to begin there, before the dread, because the dread is the thing almost every older parent carries and never says out loud. You know the thought, I've become a weight. They see me as a burden now. I'm 98 years old. I have watched families rise and strain for nearly a century, and I have read what the research actually says, and I will tell you plainly, you are almost certainly misreading how your children see you. So let me show you two things. What the evidence says is really in their heads, and the one habit done entirely out of love that makes them pull away for real. Let me name the fear without dressing it up, because shame only makes it heavier. It is the dread of being the one who needs help, of becoming dependent, slow, inconvenient, of watching your child's face tighten when you ask for one more thing. If you feel that, you are not weak and you are not alone. A researcher named Cousineau built an entire instrument to measure exactly this feeling, the self-perceived burden scale. And when you pool the studies, roughly 31% of older adults living in the community carry this anticipatory guilt. For those living alone, it climbs toward 35%. It runs higher in women than in men. So this is not your private failing. It is one of the most common feelings in later life. Now here is the cruel part, the part I need you to sit with. To avoid burdening them, we go quiet. We downplay the pain. We refuse the help. We skip mentioning the doctor's appointment. We withdraw, just a little. And those exact moves do not protect your children. They quietly manufacture the very distance you are trying to prevent. Hold that thought, because we are coming back to it. The fear is real. Your reading of it is what's off. I once spent a whole video on how marriages die, not in the fights, but in the silence. That same quiet, I've learned, pulls us away from our children too. I've left it on the card above if you'd like to sit with that one next. So let me show you the gap that actually exists. Because there is one, it is just not the gap you fear. Back in 1971, two researchers, Bengtson and Kuipers, proposed something they called the generational stake hypothesis. And they didn't just propose it. It was tested across the longitudinal study of generations. Families followed for more than 35 years. Here is the honest finding. There is a perception gap. Parents consistently rate the relationship as closer, warmer, more affectionate than their adult children rate it. Read that quickly, and it sounds like heartbreak. Read it slowly, and it changes everything. Because that gap is not rejection. It is developmental. You, the parent, are wired to see your child as your continuation, your legacy, so you lean hard toward closeness. Your grown child is wired toward autonomy, toward becoming a separate whole person, so they emphasize boundaries and separateness. Two people looking at the same bond from two different stages of life. Of course, the numbers don't match. And here is the nuance I most want you to keep. Even when your child scores the closeness lower than you do, their absolute affection, their gratitude, their sense of obligation to you, all of it stays high. Lower is not low. A child can rate the bond a notch below where you'd put it and still love you fiercely, still feel they owe you a great deal. The gap is normal variance. It is not a verdict. For years, you may have been reading a developmental setting as a personal rejection. It was never that. Now, what about the friction? The snapping, the nagging, the same argument you've had 40 times. Two researchers, Lucier and Pillemer, gave this its proper name, intergenerational ambivalence. And Karen Fingerman and Kira Burdett spent years documenting the everyday tensions between aging parents and their grown children. Here is what they found, and it surprised even me. Tension is not a sign of breakdown. It is a marker of a living, engaged relationship. The bonds with no friction at all are very often the disengaged ones, the ones where someone is quietly checked out and stopped bothering to argue. So if you and your daughter still butt heads, that is not the bad news. That is the pulse. The research even names the classic flashpoints: unsolicited advice, how often you call or visit, and your health habits, the walker you won't use, the appointment you didn't mention, the railing you keep saying you don't need. Sound familiar? So let me reframe the walker fight directly, because I have watched it play out in 100 kitchens. When your daughter snaps at you about the cane or the checkup you skipped, that sharpness is not contempt. It is worry. It is attachment. It is the anticipated loss of you. Leaking out sideways is irritation. She is not managing a nuisance. She is frightened of losing her mother. That is how they really see you, close enough to fight with, invested enough to nag. The annoyance and the love are not opposites. They are the same feeling, wearing work clothes. Now let me give you two findings that genuinely surprised me, because they overturn who we assume pulls away. And why? The first one. We tell a very old story in this culture, the fraught mother and daughter, locked in the great emotional struggle. But when young adults are actually asked, they report more ambivalence toward their fathers than their mothers. More mixed feelings, more unresolved tension. With dad, the mother-daughter blame story has been badly overstated. Father-child friction, it turns out, is structurally higher, built into different expectations of authority and emotional availability, not into anyone's personal failing. The second finding is the one that stops people cold. You would assume that more visits and more financial help from a parent would smooth everything over, buy a little peace, a little closeness. The data says the opposite. More frequent face-to-face contact and more financial support from parents was linked to higher ambivalence in their grown children, not lower. Because money and proximity can stir up a grown child's need to feel independent. A check can feel like a string. A daily visit can feel like a hovering. So here is what I want you to take from this. Closeness is not bought with more visits or bigger checks. And reading ordinary friction as rejection just keeps misdiagnosing what is really going on between you. Let me slow down here, because not every truth is an argument to win. Some you just sit with. In 2018, a researcher named Spalding studied grandparents and grandchildren, and the finding is tender. Grandparents can accurately sense that their grandchildren feel less close than they do. They are not blind to the distance. They feel it. They read it correctly, and they keep their own higher emotional stake anyway. Say that in plain words. They see the gap, and they love across it on purpose. They give more than they expect to get back. That is most parents too. That is very likely you. So the ache you carry about the gap, it is not proof of rejection. It may be proof that you are the one loving forward. I have sat with parents who keep a chair at the table for a child who rarely fills it, who leave the porch light on out of habit, then out of hope, who send the Sunday message and wait and send it again the next week. From the outside, someone might call that foolish or call it weakness. I never have. To keep reaching toward a child who has stepped back into their own full life takes a quiet, stubborn strength, the kind that gives without keeping score, that loves a person more than it needs to be loved back. There is nothing foolish in it. It is the oldest kind of courage there is. There is dignity in that. Not failure, dignity. Now I want to take a hammer to one of the most damaging ideas in all of this. The idea that the day you retire, the day you slow down, you flip from giver to drain, from asset to liability. It is simply not true, and we have the numbers. There is a vast European study called SHARE, the Survey of Health, Aging and Retirement in Europe. Researchers named Albertini, Coley, and Vogel tracked the flow of money and time across 10 nations. And what they found is that parents stay net givers of money, of time, of help, well into their 70s and beyond. Far more parents hand financial help down to their children than the other way around. The flow runs downhill from old to young for decades longer than anyone assumes. And there's a hidden subsidy in there too. Grandparent child care, the quiet, unpaid labor that props up an adult child's job and holds a household together. You may have done it without ever calling it support. Tony Antonucci has a name for the larger pattern, the convoy model. Picture a support bank. For 50 years, you made deposits, care, money, labor, the emotional work nobody counted. So when the flow finally reverses in your late 80s or 90s, your children rarely read it as a sudden injustice. It is a withdrawal from an account you funded for a lifetime, and wanting to live near them but not on top of them. Rosenmayer and Kirkes called that intimacy at a distance back in 1963. That is normal and healthy, never abandonment. Accepting care late is not a failure of independence. It is collecting on a policy you spent 50 years paying into. So let me come back to that habit I promised you, the kindness that backfires. The research calls it protective buffering. It is hiding your pain, your fear, your money trouble, your decline, to spare your children the worry. It feels like love. It feels like strength, and it quietly harms both of you. There are dyadic studies. They measure both people in the relationship at once, the one hiding and the one being protected. The actor-partner research is clear. You, the one concealing, grow more isolated, less authentic, more alone inside your own family. And your child, the one you're protecting, they sense that something is wrong but cannot name it. You haven't spared them the worry. You've stripped out the information and left them only the dread. Here is why that happens. Children are built to detect distress in a parent. It is wired deep, older than language. When you conceal, you do not erase the signal. They still feel it. You only remove the explanation. So they are left with raw anxiety and a wall they can't see around. That is the precise coldness you are trying to prevent. You manufacture it with your own silence. Remember the loop I asked you to hold? This is it closing. Going quiet does not protect them. It builds the distance. And the fix is almost insultingly simple to say, harder to do. Treat your grown child as a capable partner, not a fragile dependent. Measured honesty restores closeness. Secrecy erodes it every time. Now I want to be careful here, more careful than usual, because this is where wellness talk goes wrong. Feeling needed is not just sentimental. In the research, it tracks with how long people actually live. But I'm describing associations observed in studies, patterns across thousands of people, not a promise to any one person. Hold both of those at once. The MacArthur study of successful aging followed high-functioning older adults for years. A researcher named Grunewald looked at one question: do you feel useful to others? The people who felt persistently useless faced a substantially higher risk of dying over the follow-up than those who felt useful. And when uselessness combined with physical disability, the risk nearly doubled. The feeling and the body were not separate things. Hilbrand and colleagues found that grandparents who provided non-custodial child care, just helping, not raising the children, showed about 37% lower mortality risk over 20 years. A population-level association, I want to stress, not a personal cure. Why would that be? Steve Cole and Barbara Fredrickson mapped a mechanism. Purposeful contribution to others is linked to gene expression that shifts away from chronic inflammation. Mere pleasure-seeking is not. Your body, it seems, can tell the difference between fun and meaning. Being needed, even just for your emotional presence, your voice on the phone, is a quiet, measurable thread running through a longer life. What the evidence shows and life confirms. Something to lean into. Never a substitute for your doctor. That pull to feel needed isn't only sentiment. I gave a whole talk on why losing your sense of purpose after 65 is the real danger, far more than your body. It's on the card above whenever you want it. There's one more belief I need you to put down because it ages you from the inside. Becca Levy studied this, her stereotype embodiment work, built on Ohio data going back to the 1970s. She found that people with positive self-perceptions of aging lived about 7.5 years longer than those with negative ones. Let that land, 7.5 years. In her data, that edge was larger than the one from low blood pressure, larger than the one from regular exercise. And she found the lever, what she called the will to live, the running internal judgment, mostly below awareness that life still outweighs its hardships. When that judgment stays, yes, the body keeps fighting for you. So here is the reframe. When you absorb the cultural script, that old age equals uselessness, that you equal burden, the body can begin to treat it as true, and the decline becomes partly self-fulfilling. You start to fold before you are pushed. I am not telling you to just think positive. That is too thin, and it will never stand in for the care a real illness needs. I am telling you something sterner and kinder. The burden story is a borrowed belief. You did not author it. You absorbed it decades ago from a culture that fears age. And a belief you borrowed you are allowed to put down. Most decline begins earlier than people think, including the decline that starts as a single thought about yourself. Now, for some of you, the distance is not a misreading. It is real. So let me speak to that plainly, without flinching. Carl Pillemer, in his book, Fault Lines, ran the first large national study of family estrangement. Roughly 1 in 4 adults are estranged from some relative, about 10% from a parent or a child. If that is you, hear this. You are not uniquely broken. You are one of millions. And let me retire a myth. This is not some new epidemic invented by modern therapy talk. Rifts have always existed. People simply hide them less now. Your grandmother's family had its silences too. They just went to the grave unspoken. Pillemer also interviewed the people who found their way back. And the path that actually works is not what most expect. The reconcilers stopped demanding an agreed-upon version of the past. They stopped waiting for the perfect apology. They focused instead on the relationship they could have now, with realistic expectations and clear functional boundaries, not a fantasy of total healing, a workable present. I will be blunt, the way a friend should be. An imperfect, partial reconnection nearly always beats the slow, toxic stress of a complete freeze. You do not have to resolve the past to share a present. So what do you actually do this week? Not a grand gesture. The opposite. Small, real, and now. Action 1. One honest disclosure. Pick a single worry you've been hiding, a health thing, a money thing, a fear you carry at 3 in the morning, and say it plainly to one of your children. Not all of it. One true sentence. That single sentence ends the protective buffering and the distance it builds faster than any speech. Action 2. Relieve the guessing. Write down your preferences. Sort an advance directive so that no one you love has to decide blind in a crisis, in a hospital hallway, sick with doubt. Frame it not as paperwork about you. Frame it as a gift to them. You are lifting a weight off their shoulders before they ever have to carry it. Offer something only you can give, your time. A story no one else holds. Help with a grandchild. Your judgment on a hard decision. This feeds the very sense of mattering the studies tied to a longer, steadier life, and it hands your child the double gift of being needed by you and trusted with you. Honesty, the directive, and contribution. 3 small acts, each one backed by the evidence. Late is not the same as finished. The bond rebuilds in small present-day acts, not grand gestures. So let me leave you with the truth under all of this. Your grown children almost certainly love you more than the gap will ever let them show. And the distance you fear is usually fixable, from your side first. Your future is being practiced now. So reach toward them today, before the silence hardens into regret. Tell me in the comments which child you will be honest with first, and subscribe so we can keep thinking through these things together while there is still time to use them. If that distance still aches, start where I once asked you to, not with them, but with the quiet patterns inside you that keep them at arm's length.